My name is Celeste, and I'm 45 years old, and when I refused to give my daughter what she demanded, she learned the hard way that the house keys weren't hers to take. The house wasn't just brick and mortar. To me, it was the heart of everything Raphael and I built. When we first bought it nearly 2 decades ago, it was small and unassuming, a two-story home with peeling paint and creaky stairs, but we poured ourselves into it. Raphael planted roses in the garden, insisting they would bloom brighter if I was the one who watered them. I painted the kitchen walls a cheerful yellow because I wanted the room to feel like morning even on the darkest days. Over the years, our laughter filled the hallways, our arguments rattled the walls, our love anchored its foundation. Raphael is gone now. Cancer took him too soon, far too soon, but his presence is everywhere. His hammer still hangs in the garage. His coat is still draped on the hook by the door. And every time I turn the key in the front lock, I hear his voice teasing, "Home, sweet home, my love." Still standing, just like us. It's no wonder I cling to this place so fiercely. To me, it isn't just a house, it's a sanctuary, a time capsule, a monument to the life we built together. But to my daughter Vivian, it's something else entirely. To her, it's a prize. A possession, something owed. Vivian grew up within these walls. She took her first steps across this living room floor, learned to ride her bike down this street, had her first sleepover in the attic bedroom. For years I believed she loved the house as much as I did, that it carried the same sacred weight. But as she grew older, her tone shifted. Instead of speaking of memories, she spoke of potential. Instead of nostalgia, there was entitlement. "Mom," she said one afternoon, standing in the kitchen with her arms crossed. "This house is too much for you. You should think about the future. About me. About how I'll keep it up, when it's mine." The casual certainty in her voice unsettled me. When it's mine. As if the bricks already belonged to her. As if my presence here was temporary. I brushed it off at first. "I'm not planning on going anywhere anytime soon," I told her with a smile. But she only rolled her eyes, muttering something about being practical. Practical. That was her favorite word lately. It wasn't just her, though. Her husband, Damien, encouraged it. Damien was the kind of man who walked into a room like he already owned it, and when he looked at my house, I saw hunger in his eyes. He'd gesture at the crown molding and say, "You know, Celeste, you could really open this space up. Knock down a wall or two, make it modern." He'd point at the backyard and say, "Perfect spot for a pool, don't you think?" Always speaking as if decisions were already his to make. I tried to laugh it off, but inside, I felt the sting. They weren't dreaming about their future, they were stripping me from my present. The breaking point came during a family dinner, one meant to celebrate Raphael's birthday. I had cooked his favorite meal, grilled chicken with rosemary, roasted potatoes, and chocolate mousse for dessert. I set the table with the good china, lit the candles, and placed a framed photo of him at the head of the table, as though he were still with us. Vivian arrived late, her heels clicking sharply against the floor, Damien trailing behind with his usual air of casual arrogance. They kissed my cheek, complimented the food in passing, and sat down. For the first few minutes, everything seemed fine. We toasted Raphael's memory, clinking glasses in the candlelight. But then, as the meal went on, the conversation turned. "You know, Mom," Vivian said between bites, "you really shouldn't keep this place so cluttered. It'll be hard for me to redo it all once it's mine. Damien and I have so many plans, new floors, a bigger kitchen, maybe even turning the attic into a master suite. We'll make it perfect." The words landed like a slap. "Once it's mine." Damien grinned, raising his glass. "We'll take good care of it, Celeste. Don't you worry." The others at the table shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. The laughter, the casual certainty, it all blurred together into a suffocating fog. I forced a smile, though my hands trembled in my lap. Later that night, after the dishes were washed and the candles extinguished, I sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet, but I could still hear their voices echoing through the walls. "Once it's mine. Don't you worry." I realized then that I had a choice. I could continue brushing it off, letting them speak as though my life were already over. Or I could do something about it. The thought terrified me. Confronting my only daughter? Taking steps to deny her what she believed was rightfully hers? It felt unnatural, cruel even. But what was crueler, denying her entitlement, or allowing myself to be erased from the story of my own life? I stared at Raphael's photo on the mantel, his smile steady and sure. "What would you do, my love?" I whispered. And though the house was silent, I knew the answer. Raphael had always believed in standing firm, in protecting what mattered. And what mattered now wasn't just the house itself, it was me. My dignity. My right to be remembered not as an obstacle, but as a woman who lived. I wiped my tears, straightened my shoulders, and made a vow to myself. Vivian wanted the house. She thought the keys would land in her hands simply because she was my daughter. But she was wrong. Because I had already decided the keys would go to someone else. The first cracks appeared when Vivian started calling my house hers. It happened in small ways at first, almost subtle enough to overlook. But once I noticed, I couldn't unhear it. She'd walk through the front door without knocking, drop her bag on the counter, and say, "I love how my kitchen looks in the morning light." She'd sit on the back porch and remark, "When I'm living here, I'll plant hydrangeas instead of roses, they'll look better." The word "my" dug into me each time. She didn't mean it in the nostalgic way, as in my childhood home. No, she meant ownership, possession. As if she already held the deed in her hand. One Sunday afternoon, she brought Damien along, and the two of them wandered through the house as though they were prospective buyers. They trailed their hands along the banister, peered into closets, whispered to each other in that conspiratorial way that made my skin crawl. Damien paused in the living room, his eyes scanning the walls. "We could knock this out," he said, rapping his knuckles against the plaster. "Open it up, get some natural light. Right, Viv?" Vivian nodded eagerly. "Yes, and the fireplace, it's outdated. We should modernize it. Maybe something sleek, marble or granite." I stood in the doorway, clutching a dish towel, listening to them redesign the home Raphael and I had poured ourselves into. They spoke of tearing down walls that had heard his laughter, replacing the mantel where we had hung stockings every Christmas. I couldn't stay quiet. "This is my home," I said sharply. Vivian turned, her expression caught between annoyance and pity. "Mom, don't be so dramatic. We're just thinking about the future. You won't be here forever." The words lodged in my chest like a shard of glass. Damien, unbothered, gave a casual shrug. "We just want to make sure the place doesn't go to waste. Go to waste. As though Raphael's rose bushes were waste. As though the yellow paint in the kitchen was waste. As though my very existence here was waste." I bit back, the tears stinging my eyes. "I'm still here," I whispered, though I wasn't sure they even heard me. That evening, after they left, I sat at the kitchen table with my leather notebook open before me. My hands shook as I wrote the words. Vivian called house hers. Damien suggested tearing down wall. Vivian agreed. Both spoke as if my absence were a foregone conclusion. Writing it down steadied me. Each entry felt like proof that I wasn't imagining things. Proof that their entitlement was real and growing bolder. But it wasn't just in my house. It spilled over into family gatherings too. At a cousin's baby shower, I overheard Vivian chatting with relatives. She was smiling, wine glass in hand, her tone casual but firm. "Oh, when I move into Mom's place, it'll be perfect for hosting holidays. It's so much bigger than our house. We'll finally have the space." No one corrected her. Some nodded politely, others looked away uncomfortably. I stood frozen by the doorway, clutching my gift bag, listening to my daughter erase me as though I were already gone. Later, Iris, my oldest friend, found me sitting alone on the porch, my chest tight. "Celeste," she said softly. I heard what she said. That wasn't right. Tears spilled down my cheeks. It's like I don't exist anymore. I'm just a placeholder until she can take the keys. Iris placed a steady hand on mine. "Then you need to protect yourself. You can't wait for them to suddenly remember who you are. You have to make sure they can't erase you." Her words struck me like lightning. Protect myself. That night, I wrote again in my notebook. Vivian told relatives she will move into my house. Called it perfect for hosting holidays. Tone, entitled, ownership assumed. Witness, Iris. The more I wrote, the clearer it became. Vivian wasn't just careless, she was convinced. She had already rewritten the story in her mind, one where I had quietly stepped aside and handed her the keys. And Damien? He was her accomplice. One evening, they both came over for dinner. I served roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans sautéed with garlic, Raphael's favorites. Meals that had always made the house feel like home. They ate quickly, barely complimenting the food. After dinner, Damien leaned back in his chair, eyeing the chandelier above. "This could be replaced too," he said idly. "Something more modern, maybe a crystal fixture." Vivian smirked. "Yes, it'll look great once we redo everything." "Mom, don't you think it's time to let go of the old?" I set my fork down, my stomach twisting. "This isn't just old, Vivian. This is memory. This is history." She rolled her eyes. "You're too sentimental. Houses aren't museums. They're meant to be lived in." Her words cut deep, because the truth was, I did live here. Every morning I woke to the creak of these floors. Every night I closed my eyes under this roof. But to her, my life in this home didn't matter. She had already skipped to the next chapter, one where she was the main character, and I was erased. That night, when the dishes were cleaned and the silence returned, I sat again with my notebook. Damien suggested chandelier replacement. Vivian dismissed memories as too sentimental. Both framed house as theirs. My handwriting was shaky but determined. As I closed the book, I made another vow. This wasn't just entitlement, it was erasure. They wanted to erase Raphael, erase me, erase every laugh and tear that had soaked into these walls. But they were wrong. This house wasn't theirs to claim. It wasn't theirs to redesign. It wasn't theirs to inherit, because the keys, when the time came, would go to someone else. That night, I realized my daughter didn't just want the house, she wanted to erase me from it. It wasn't just careless words, it was entitlement dressed as inevitability. After that dinner, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling while their voices replayed in my mind. Vivian's dismissive laugh, Damien's smug tone. "When it's ours, once, we redo it. You won't be here forever." The words no longer felt like slips or jokes, they felt like a script they'd rehearsed together. A future they had already written for me, one where my presence in this house was temporary, inconvenient, and best forgotten. I thought back over the years. I remembered Vivian at 25, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, saying, "Mom, you don't really need such a big place anymore. Why not sell and get something smaller? I mean, eventually it'll come to me anyway." I'd laughed awkwardly, telling her I wasn't ready to leave. But the words had stung even then. I remembered Damien at a 4th of July barbecue, raising a beer and saying to his friends, "One day this backyard will be perfect for a pool. We'll host all the summer parties." His friends had laughed, and I had forced a smile, pretending it was harmless. And I remembered last Christmas, when Vivian had said flatly, "Don't bother replacing the roof, Mom. It's not worth it. It'll all need redoing anyway when I move in." At the time, I had swallowed my hurt, telling myself they didn't mean it cruelly. But now, looking back, I saw the pattern. It wasn't thoughtlessness. It was entitlement, steady and growing, disguised as practicality. They weren't waiting to honor me, they were waiting me out. The realization hollowed me out, but in that hollow space, something else began to take root. Resolve. The next morning, I pulled my leather notebook closer and began a new entry. I didn't just write down their latest comments, I wrote down the flashbacks too. Vivian, age 25, said I should sell. It'll come to me anyway. Damien, 4th of July, backyard for pool, called it perfect when it's ours. Vivian, Christmas, dismissed roof repairs. Each note steadied me. Each page was a record of truth. Proof that I wasn't imagining the way they had been circling like vultures for years. Later that afternoon, Iris stopped by with muffins fresh from her oven. She had a way of knowing when I needed her without me having to say it. We sat on the porch with steaming cups of tea, the roses blooming around us, the sunlight warm but gentle. I showed her my notebook, her brows knitted as she flipped through the pages. "Celeste," she murmured. "This isn't just entitlement. This is erasure. They're speaking like you're already gone." Tears pricked my eyes. That's exactly how it feels. As if I don't exist anymore, as if I'm just a placeholder until the keys drop into their hands. Iris closed the book gently and looked at me with steady eyes. "Then you have to protect yourself. Don't wait for them to suddenly respect you. You need to make sure legally, financially, practically they can't touch what you don't want them to touch." Her words sent a shiver through me. Protect myself. I've never thought about, I hesitated, changing the will, or making it impossible for them to get the house. "You should," she said firmly. "You deserve peace, not to spend the rest of your life wondering when they'll try to push you out." I sipped my tea, her words settling like stones in the bottom of my stomach. Could I really do that? Disinherit my only daughter? Place the house, the very heart of our family, in someone else's hands? The thought felt brutal. But then I remembered Vivian's smirk, Damien's laugh, their talk of demolishing walls that had heard Raphael's voice. Yes, I could. I needed to. That night, I walked through the house slowly, touching the walls, the banister, the photographs. I whispered Raphael's name into the silence and felt strength in the reply that never came, but somehow always lingered. "This is ours." Not theirs, ours, and I'll make sure it stays that way. I returned to my notebook and wrote one final line at the bottom of the page. If they only see me as an obstacle, then I will become a wall they can never climb. The next morning, I pulled out my phone and dialed Evelyn Clark, the lawyer who had helped Raphael and me with estate planning years ago. When her assistant answered, I steadied my voice. "I'd like to schedule an appointment," I said. "It's urgent. I need to change my will." After hanging up, I felt both terrified and powerful. This wasn't just a defense, it was a weapon. They had laughed at me, dismissed me, treated me as though I were already gone. But they were about to learn that I was not only present, I was stronger than ever. I closed my notebook, my pen still resting inside, and whispered into the quiet room. "You wanted the house, Vivian. But you forgot one thing: I still hold the keys. If they only saw me as an obstacle, then I would become a wall they could never climb." The house wasn't just walls and windows, it was my life. Every corner of my home told a story. The creaky stair that Raphael always joked about fixing but never did. The faint pencil marks on the kitchen doorway where we measured Vivian's height year after year. The worn spot on the living room couch where Raphael used to sit with his coffee every morning, humming to himself before work. To outsiders, it was an ordinary suburban house. To me, it was a tapestry of memory, woven together with laughter, tears, and love. It wasn't just shelter, it was the place where I became myself. But to Vivian and Damien, it was only square footage, property value, resale potential. I thought about the day Raphael and I first moved in. We were so young, so hopeful. The walls were bare, the paint chipped, but we didn't care. He had carried me over the threshold, both of us laughing so hard he nearly dropped me. "This is it," he had said, "our forever home." And it had been. Through the sleepless nights with a newborn, through birthday parties crowded with giggling children, through quiet evenings when the only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock, this was where we lived, where we loved. Even after Raphael was gone, the house still held him. His presence lingered in the worn handle of his favorite mug, in the old jacket still hanging by the door, in the roses he had planted with his own hands. When I watered them, I could almost hear him say, "Don't drown them. Celeste, roses like a gentle touch." But Vivian never saw any of that. When she looked around, she didn't see her father's love or her mother's life. She saw square footage to be redesigned, walls to be knocked down, furniture to be replaced. One afternoon, she stopped by unexpectedly, Damien in tow. I was in the middle of dusting the bookshelf in the living room when they walked in, uninvited as usual. Damien immediately scanned the room, his eyes landing on the rows of framed photographs, our wedding, family vacations, Vivian's childhood milestones. He smirked. This room could use a refresh. Too much clutter. Open shelving would make it look modern. Vivian nodded. Yes, and Mom. Half these photos could be digitized anyway. You don't need to keep them all out. It makes the place feel old. The word stung. Old. These are my memories, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Vivian sighed, exasperated. I know, Mom. But memories don't have to sit on display. Houses should look alive, not like shrines. A shrine. That's what she saw when she looked at my life. I clenched the rag in my hands, fighting the urge to scream. Instead, I nodded, playing the role of the weary mother. Maybe you're right, I murmured. But inside, my resolve hardened. That night, I opened my notebook again. Vivian called photos clutter, house a shrine. Damien dismissed memories as outdated decor. Both see house as theirs to modernize. The ink pressed deep into the page, my handwriting sharp. Later, Iris called, her voice warm and steady. How are you holding up? I hesitated before answering. It hurts. Every time they speak, it's like they erase Raphael a little more. Like they erase me. Then don't let them, Iris said firmly. Memories aren't clutter. They're legacy. And you have to protect that legacy. Her words stuck with me long after the call ended. Protect the legacy. That was what I was doing, wasn't it? This wasn't about revenge, it was about preservation. Ensuring that Raphael's roses bloomed long after Damien's arrogance and Vivian's entitlement faded into dust. The next morning, I walked through the house slowly, letting the memories wash over me. The yellow kitchen Raphael had once teased me about painting too bright. The attic where Vivian had strung Christmas lights as a teenager, pretending it was her private sanctuary. The dining room where we had celebrated Raphael's last birthday. Candles flickering while he smiled bravely through his pain. Every wall whispered his name. Every floorboard carried our footsteps. I thought of Vivian again, her dismissive tone, her impatience with sentimentality. How could she not feel what I felt? How could she not see the love built into every nail and brick? But the answer was clear. She didn't want to see it. Sentiment was a burden to her. Love was clutter. Memory was outdated. She wanted the house stripped of history, stripped of me. And I would not let that happen. Later that week, Evelyn Clark's office called to confirm my appointment. My stomach tightened as the assistant said, "We'll see you Tuesday at 2. As I hung up the phone, I felt a mixture of dread and relief. Dread because the decision was final now, there was no turning back. Relief because I was finally doing something. Finally taking control of a future that had felt stolen from me. That night, I lit a candle by Raphael's photo and sat in the quiet living room. The flame flickered gently, casting shadows across the walls. I closed my eyes and whispered, "I'm doing this for us. For our love. For the life we built. They won't erase us." And though there was only silence in response, I felt a warmth in my chest, as if Raphael were there beside me, steady and proud. So I made a decision that would change everything. I called my lawyer. When I sat in Evelyn's office, I knew there was no going back. The last time I had been in Evelyn Clark's law office was nearly 15 years ago, when Raphael and I first put our estate plans in order. Back then, it had been about love and responsibility, making sure Vivian was cared for if anything ever happened to us. I remembered Raphael squeezing my hand as we signed the papers, his eyes soft. "We're just being careful, Celeste," he had whispered. "It's love," written down. But now, walking through those glass doors again, the weight was different. This wasn't about securing Vivian's future, it was about securing mine from her. Evelyn greeted me warmly. She hadn't changed much, her sharp suit, her neat hair, her eyes that missed nothing. She shook my hand firmly, leading me into her office. The shelves were lined with thick legal volumes, but her desk was tidy, a neat stack of files arranged at one corner. "Celeste," she said as we sat down. "It's been a long time. What brings you back to me?" My throat tightened. For a moment, I almost faltered. How could I say it out loud that my own daughter was plotting my erasure? But Evelyn's steady gaze gave me courage. My daughter Vivian, I began slowly. She believes the house will be hers. Not someday, not in the distant future. She speaks as though it already island. She and her husband make plans in front of me, laugh about renovations, dismiss my memories as clutter. They treat me like I'm already gone. Evelyn's brows furrowed, but her expression stayed calm. That must hurt deeply. It does, I admitted, my voice breaking. Then that it scares me, because if they think that way now, what's to stop them from pushing harder? I need to protect myself. I need to make sure they can't touch the house when I'm gone. Evelyn nodded slowly. I understand, and you're right to act now. Let's talk options. She opened a folder and pulled out a notepad. The first step is updating your will. We'll revoke the old one and create a new version that reflects your wishes. But a will alone can be contested, especially if Vivian feels entitled. To protect you, I recommend creating a living trust. That way, the house is placed in the trust while you're still alive, and upon your passing, it will transfer smoothly to the trustee you appoint. The word trustee made me pause. Who would that be? Someone you trust completely, she replied. Someone who will honor your wishes, not their own desires. I thought of Iris, my loyal friend who had stood by me through Raphael's illness, who had listened without judgment, who had never once spoken of the house as though it were hers. My chest loosened a little. Iris, I said firmly. She'll do it, Evelyn smiled. Good choice. We'll designate Iris as trustee. Vivian and Damien will have no claim to override her authority. And to be extra cautious, we'll include a disinheritance clause. It will state that any heir who demonstrates cruelty, entitlement, or neglect toward you will be disinherited in full. That language gives us teeth. I almost laughed at the bitter irony. Vivian's own words, her own arrogance, had handed me all the evidence I needed. Evelyn continued, We can also include charitable donations if you'd like. It's common to honor a loved one by leaving part of the estate to causes they cared about. Tears pricked my eyes. Raphael, he always donated to the Veterans Fund. And we supported the Children's Hospital every year. Perfect, Evelyn said, jotting notes. We'll create provisions for both. That way, your legacy will extend beyond your family. She began drafting, her pen scratching quickly. Now, medical directives. Do you want Vivian to have authority if something happens to you? The thought made me shiver. Vivian, deciding my care? Vivian, who wanted me out of the way? No. Never. No, I said firmly. Give it to Iris as well. She's the only one I trust. Evelyn nodded. Very well. Then Iris will have full authority over medical decisions, and will document it clearly. For the next 2 hours, we worked through the details. Evelyn asked questions, explained options, and I answered each one with growing certainty. The fear that had once paralyzed me began to dissolve, replaced by something sharper, control. When the final documents were ready, Evelyn slid them across the desk. The paper felt heavy in my hands, weighty with consequence. My name waited on the signature line. Take your time, she said gently. This is your voice. Make sure it says what you want it to say. I read every word. Revocation of prior wills. Designation of trustee. Iris Moreno. Disinheritance clause. Charitable gifts. Each phrase was a shield, each paragraph a wall. When I reached the last page, my hand no longer trembled. I signed my name in bold strokes, Celeste Navarro. The notary stamped the documents with a loud thunk. Evelyn gathered the pages into an envelope and handed me a copy. It's done, she said. They cannot touch this house. Not now, not ever. Relief flooded me, so strong I almost wept. For the first time in months I felt safe. Walking out of her office, the autumn air felt crisper, brighter. The city buzzed around me, but I carried a calm certainty inside. I had done it. I had preserved Raphael's memory. I had protected myself. Vivian thought the keys were hers. Damien thought the walls were his to knock down. But they were wrong. The law was on my side now, and so was the truth. That evening, I sat on the porch with Iris. handing her a copy of the trust. She read quietly, her eyes wide, then looked up at me with fierce pride. "Celeste," she whispered, "you've taken your power back." I smiled, a weight lifting from my chest. "Yes," I said softly. "And now, the house is safe." As my pen signed the paper, I knew the keys would never land in Vivian's hands. Vivian's entitlement grew bolder once she thought I was too tired to resist. For years, I had been quiet when my daughter pushed boundaries. I had smiled when she dismissed my stories, swallowed my hurt when she called my memories clutter, and laughed along when Damien cracked jokes about pools and remodels. But now, with Evelyn's documents safely locked away, I had no reason to keep swallowing. Instead, I began listening differently. Not just as a mother absorbing her child's words, but as a witness collecting evidence. The first opportunity came quickly. Vivian stopped by on a Wednesday evening, Damien in tow. I was sitting in the living room, knitting a scarf, when she wandered in with her usual air of possession. "Mom," she said, setting her purse on the table without asking, "I think you should consider moving into a condo. It would be easier for you, no stairs, no big yard to manage. And Damien and I could start moving things here sooner rather than later. We'd even help you pack." I set my knitting down, forcing my face to stay calm. "Oh?" I asked lightly. "And where would I go?" She smiled in that patronizing way that made me feel small. "Somewhere cozy. Don't worry. We'd make sure you're close. It's just practical." There was that word again. Practical. Damien chimed in, leaning back in my armchair like it already belonged to him. "Besides, this place is too much for you. Houses need energy. Upkeep. We've got the energy. We'll take good care of it." I nodded, biting back the words that burned in my chest. Instead, I reached for the small recorder I had tucked under a cushion earlier that week, just in case. I pressed the button discreetly, their voices captured in digital permanence. That night, after they left, I wrote in my notebook, "Vivian urged me to move into condo, said house too big, called it practical. Both assumed transfer would happen soon. The next day, I transferred the audio file onto my laptop, labeling it carefully with the date. Then I backed it up to a USB drive and slipped it into the lockbox where I now kept Evelyn's documents. Every careless remark was becoming a brick in the fortress I was building. A week later, another moment came. Vivian and Damien invited me to dinner at their house. I accepted, curious to see if they would talk so freely in their own space. Over pasta and wine, Damien leaned back in his chair, grinning. "You know, once we're in your place, I'll finally have room for a proper bar in the den." Imagine it, Viv Friday nights with everyone gathered around, watching the game on a giant screen. Vivian laughed, twirling her fork. "Yes, and I'll finally have the kitchen I've always dreamed of. We'll tear down that wall between the dining room and the living room. Open concept, it'll be stunning." I froze with my glass halfway to my lips. They weren't even pretending anymore. "Won't that be expensive?" I asked, feigning innocence. Damien shrugged. "It's worth it. Besides, we'll save plenty by not having to buy a house of our own." Vivian nodded, sipping her wine. "Exactly. Why waste money when it's already waiting for us?" I excused myself to the bathroom, my hands shaking. I opened my phone, hit record, and when I returned, I set it face down on the table while they continued talking. Every word captured. Every laugh at my expense sealed in memory. That night, I added another entry to my notebook. Vivian called house, waiting for us. Damien said they'd save money by not buying, implied inevitability. Both discussed renovations as certainty. I underlined the word waiting 3 times. To them, I was the only obstacle left. The entries grew quickly after that. Each visit, each dinner, each casual conversation gave me more ammunition. Vivian's words at a family gathering. When I move into Mom's house, holidays will be so much easier. Damien's remark to a neighbor. We'll be moving in soon. Just a matter of time. The arrogance wasn't slowing down, it was accelerating. And they had no idea I was recording every syllable. One Saturday morning, Iris came over for tea, and I showed her my growing collection. She flipped through the notebook, her brow furrowing deeper with every page. Then she listened to one of the recordings. Damien's voice clear as day. Why waste money when it's already waiting for us? Her lips tightened. Celeste, this is gold. If they ever tried to contest anything, you'd have more than enough proof of their intent. They're digging their own graves with their mouths. I let out a shaky laugh. It almost feels too easy. I just let them talk. Good, Iris said firmly. Let them keep talking. The more they reveal, the stronger you become. She was right. I realized then that silence was my greatest weapon. By playing the part of the weary, sentimental mother, I encouraged their arrogance. They thought I was too weak to resist, too tired to fight. But the weaker they thought I was, the more careless they became and the more evidence I gathered. I began practicing the performance deliberately. I'd sigh when Vivian talked about condos, nod when Damien described renovations. I let my shoulders slump, my voice soften, my hands tremble slightly as if with age. Every sign of weakness was bait, and they took it gladly, revealing more each time. And yet, in private, I grew. Sharper, stronger. The lockbox under my bed was heavy with documents, recordings, and USB drives. My notebook filled page after page with their words, their plans, their arrogance. One evening, as I closed the book after another entry, I caught sight of Raphael's jacket still hanging by the door. I smiled softly. They think they've already won, I whispered. But they don't know who they're playing against. The house felt warmer in that moment, as if Raphael were still standing guard. I wasn't alone. I had his memory, Iris's loyalty, Evelyn's precision, and their own words working against them. They thought they were clever, but every word was evidence. I decided to let them think they had already won. There's a strange kind of power in being underestimated. For so long, Vivian and Damien had treated me like I was fragile, forgetful, incapable of holding on to what mattered. They thought of me as sentimental clutter, like the photographs they wanted to pack away. But now that Evelyn had secured the future in legal stone, I realized I could use their perception to my advantage. So I started to play the role they had written for me. When Vivian came over one afternoon with grocery bags, I let her see me struggling to lift a carton of milk. She swooped in, sighing with exaggerated pity. Mom, you shouldn't be lifting heavy things anymore. I smiled faintly, letting my shoulders droop. You're right, dear. I guess I'm not as strong as I used to be. Her expression softened with triumph, not compassion. And in that moment, I knew she believed I was inching closer to handing her everything. That evening, I recorded the conversation in my notebook. Vivian commented on weakness, implied decline. Seemed pleased by thought of dependency. The next test came a week later. I invited them over for dinner, just pasta, nothing fancy, and halfway through, I sighed, letting my gaze drift to the ceiling. What's wrong, Mom? Vivian asked, twirling her fork. Oh, nothing, I said lightly. Just, sometimes the stairs feel like too much. Her eyes lit up. Damien leaned forward. See? That's exactly what we've been saying. This house is too much for you. You should start thinking about moving. We could help you find a condo, sell this place, and make the transition smooth. I let my lips tremble into a weary smile. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time to think about that. The relief that washed over them was almost comical. Damien looked smug, as though the house keys were already jangling in his pocket. Vivian reached for my hand, squeezing it with false sweetness. Don't worry, Mom. We'll take care of everything. Inside, I burned. But outside, I nodded. Thank you, dear. After they left, I sat at the kitchen table and pulled out my recorder. I replayed Damien's words. This house is too much for you. Sell it. We'll make the transition smooth. His voice dripped with entitlement. I labeled the file, saved it, and added another entry to my notebook. Each performance gave me more evidence, and the evidence gave me more strength. Iris noticed the change in me. When I confided in her during one of our porch teas, she leaned back and studied me carefully. "You're calmer," she said. "What changed?" I smiled. "I stopped fighting them outright. I let them think they're winning. And in their arrogance, they hand me everything I need." Her eyes gleamed with approval. "Smart. Very smart. It's like baiting a trap." "Exactly." The turning point came one Sunday afternoon, when Vivian and Damien brought over a real estate brochure. They spread it across my kitchen table, grinning like children with a prize. "Look at this," Damien said, tapping a glossy photo of a sleek condo unit downtown. 2 bedrooms, easy maintenance, close to shops. Perfect for you. Vivian chimed in eagerly. "And once you're settled there, we can finally start remodeling here. We've been dreaming about this for so long, Mom. It'll be perfect." I widened my eyes, feigning frailty and gratitude. "Oh, that does look nice," I said softly, studying the brochure as though it were a gift. "And you'd take care of the house for me?" "Of course," Vivian said quickly, her voice bright. "We'll keep it safe, we'll make it beautiful." I nodded, pretending to blink back tears. "You're such good children." They left that afternoon practically glowing with satisfaction. As soon as the door closed behind them, I burst into a bitter laugh. Good children. If only they knew. I slipped the brochure into my notebook, taping it to the page. Then I wrote, "Vivian and Damien brought condo brochure, encouraged me to move. Implied inevitability. Both eager, tone triumphant." Piece by piece, they were building the case against themselves, brick by brick. The next week, I pushed the performance further. At a family gathering, I forgot a cousin's name and chuckled about how memory seemed to slip more these days. Vivian's face lit up with smug satisfaction. Later, I caught her whispering to Damien, "It's happening. Sooner than we thought." That night, I wrote furiously in my notebook, my hand pressing deep grooves into the page. Vivian remarked to Damien about my decline, tone triumphant. Evidence of anticipation. But playing weak wasn't just about collecting words, it was about letting them trap themselves emotionally. The more they thought victory was near, the less they tried to hide their greed. One evening, Damien stood in my kitchen, drink in hand, and said bluntly, "Once this place is ours, we'll finally get rid of all this old furniture." "New start," Vivian laughed. "Yes, Mom, we'll help you pack. Don't worry about a thing." I looked at them both with soft eyes, nodding as though I were grateful. "You're so thoughtful." Inside, I was screaming. But outwardly, I was the perfect picture of weary acceptance. That night, I added another recording to my growing collection and wrote another entry in my notebook. My arsenal was growing, and they didn't even know it. As the weeks passed, I realized something remarkable. For the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. Yes, their arrogance still hurt, but it no longer crushed me, because now every word, every smirk, every brochure was fuel. They thought they were watching me fade. But really, I was sharpening the knife. One evening, sitting alone with Raphael's jacket draped across my lap, I whispered, "They think they've won, my love. But they've only made me stronger. When the time comes, they'll realize the keys were never theirs. Their arrogance would be their undoing, and I was patient enough to wait. The more silent I became, the more reckless they grew. It amazed me how quickly arrogance turns into carelessness. With each passing week, Vivian and Damien seemed less cautious, less concerned with how their words sounded, more emboldened by the illusion of my decline. They believed my silence meant surrender. They thought the fight was already over. And so, they began bragging. It started at a cousin's birthday party. I was in the kitchen, helping Teresa slice cake, when I overheard Vivian in the living room, laughing with a group of relatives. "When we're living in Mom's house, we'll have so much more room for parties like this," she said breezily. "The yard is perfect for barbecues, and honestly, it'll be such a relief to have a place that feels big enough for us." Her words echoed through the walls like a slap. Teresa's knife stopped mid-slice. She glanced at me, her face pale. Did she just say? Yes, I whispered tightly. One of the relatives asked, "Oh, is your mom moving soon?" Vivian smiled smugly. Eventually. She knows the house is better for us. It's just a matter of time. My blood boiled. I wanted to storm into the room, to shout that I wasn't moving anywhere, that I wasn't handing over a single key. But instead, I stayed quiet. My jaw clenched, and let her dig her own grave. Later, when the party ended, Teresa pulled me aside. "Celeste," I heard every word. "She's already speaking like it's hers." I nodded grimly. "Would you be willing to say that? If I ever needed you to?" Teresa's eyes hardened. "Yes. Of course. What she's doing isn't right." I thanked her, my heart pounding. Another witness, another brick in my wall. But Vivian wasn't finished. The next week, Damien bragged to my neighbor, Rosa. I was tending to Raphael's roses by the fence when I heard his voice drift through the hedge. "Beautiful place, isn't it?" Damien said, gesturing toward my house. Rosa, kind as ever, nodded. "Yes, Celeste keeps it well." Damien chuckled. "Oh, we'll be taking over soon enough. Got big plans, knock down some walls, modernize everything, maybe even put in a pool. It's going to be incredible." Rosa blinked, startled. "But it's her home." He shrugged. "Not for long." I froze, the pruning shears trembling in my hand. His words were a dagger, sharp and arrogant. After he walked away, Rosa came straight to me. "Celeste," she said softly. "I don't know if you heard, but—" "I did," I interrupted. My voice steady though my chest felt tight. Her brow furrowed. "I don't understand how they can speak that way." "It's cruel." "It is," I agreed. "But thank you for telling me. It matters that someone else hears it too." That evening, I added 2 new entries to my notebook. Vivian Cousin's birthday. Told relatives' house would be hers soon. Claimed I'd move out. Witness, Teresa. Damien conversation with Rosa. Said they'd take over. Described remodel, pool. Witness, Rosa. I underlined the word witness in both entries. Their arrogance was no longer private, it was public. And every public remark meant another ally for me. The following Sunday, Iris came over for tea. I handed her the notebook, open to the newest pages. She read quietly, her mouth tightening with each line. "They're careless," she said at last. "They've gone from greedy to reckless." I nodded. "They think my silence is surrender. But it's strategy," she said, her eyes gleaming. "Exactly." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of it heavy but oddly empowering. Each careless comment Vivian and Damien made was a rope they tied around themselves, a noose tightening with every word. And they weren't done. At a church potluck 2 weeks later, I heard Vivian again. She was talking to a group of women near the buffet table, her voice full of pride. "Once I'm living in Mom's place, I'll finally have the space for everything I've wanted. The kitchen is going to be incredible once we redo it," one of the women asked. "Oh, is Celeste moving?" Vivian shrugged casually. "She knows it's better this way. It's inevitable." That word inevitable hit me like ice. Afterward, one of the women approached me quietly. "Celeste, I don't know what's going on, but Vivian spoke as though your house was already hers." "I thought you should know." I smiled sadly. "I know. Thank you for telling me." That night, I added yet another entry. Vivian church potluck. Called inheritance inevitable. Told others house would be hers soon. Witnesses present. The pages of my notebook were filling faster now, the ink dark and steady. What once had been only my private pain was now public evidence. And the more public it became, the stronger I felt. No one could say I imagined it. No one could claim I twisted their words. They were doing it themselves, openly, boldly, arrogantly. I began to picture the day of reckoning. The moment I would pull out this notebook, play the recordings, and let their own voices condemn them in front of everyone. The image gave me strength, gave me patience. Because that day was coming. One evening, as I sat in the living room with the notebook in my lap, Raphael's photo on the mantel above, I whispered, "They think the house is theirs. But the truth will burn them." And I swear, the house seemed to hum around me, as if Raphael himself was agreeing. They were already living in the house in their minds, but I had already given the keys to someone else. It was time to bring the truth out into the open. For weeks, I had let them talk. I had let them plan renovations over my dining table, brag about their future home at family gatherings, and dismiss my memories as clutter. And for weeks, I had recorded it all, every smug laugh, every careless word. My notebook was thick now, pages filled with entries dated and detailed. The lockbox under my bed was heavy with recordings, legal documents, and backups. But evidence meant nothing if it stayed in the dark. It was time to turn on the light. I knew Vivian and Damien would never admit the truth unless forced. And I knew that if I confronted them alone, they would twist my words, call me dramatic, claim I misunderstood. No, this needed witnesses. This needed an audience. So I decided to do what they never expected. Invite them to dinner. I called Vivian one Thursday afternoon. She answered on the second ring, her tone already distracted. "Mom? What's up?" I kept my voice soft, practiced, the tone of a weary woman who had accepted her fate. "Vivian, I think it's time we talk about the future. About the house. About everything." There was a pause. Then the rush of excitement she tried and failed to disguise. "Really? You mean you're ready to make plans?" I let out a sigh, just enough to sound defeated. "Yes, come for dinner Saturday. Bring Damien. I'd like Teresa and Adriana here too. And Rosa, I want her perspective as a neighbor." Vivian hesitated for half a second, perhaps wondering why I wanted others present, but her greed smoothed over her suspicion. "Of course, Mom. We'll be there." When I hung up, my hands trembled, not from fear, but from anticipation. The trap was set. The next 2 days, I prepared carefully. I cooked Raphael's favorite dishes, roast chicken, rosemary potatoes, green beans with almonds because I wanted his presence felt at the table. I polished the silverware, ironed the lace tablecloth, and lit candles, just as I had for birthdays and anniversaries. But this time, it wasn't celebration. It was judgment. When Saturday came, I dressed with intention. A navy dress, simple but strong. Daniel's bracelet on my wrist. A silent reminder that I carried his strength with me. I placed my leather notebook on the sideboard within reach, my laptop hidden in the drawer beside it, the speaker ready to play recordings if needed. At 6 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. Vivian entered first, smiling in a way that felt more like triumph than affection. Damien followed, his usual swagger intact, as though he were already lord of the manor. Behind them came Teresa and Adriana, their faces curious but cautious. Rosa arrived last, holding a small box of pastries, her eyes kind but sharp. We gathered at the table. The smell of roasted chicken filled the room. The candles flickered, and for a moment, it almost felt like old times. Almost. Dinner began with polite conversation. Adrian talked about school, Teresa about her new garden. Vivian and Damien, however, steered every topic back to the house. "This dining room will be so much brighter once we knock down that wall," Damien said casually, gesturing with his fork. Vivian laughed. "Yes, and Mom, we'll keep one of your paintings for nostalgia's sake, but honestly, most of this furniture should go. We'll make it more modern." The words stung, but I stayed calm. I even forced a chuckle. "You two have so many plans." "Of course," Vivian said brightly. "We've been dreaming of this for years." Teresa's fork clattered against her plate. Adriana shifted uncomfortably. Rosa's eyes narrowed. Perfect. Witnesses were hearing the arrogance for themselves. After the plates were cleared, I stood slowly, resting my hand on the back of my chair for effect. The room quieted. Thank you all for coming tonight, I said, my voice steady. I told you this dinner was about the future, and that's true, but not in the way you think. Vivian tilted her head, her smile faint but expectant. Damien leaned back, smugness dripping from his posture. Teresa and Adriana exchanged glances. Rosa folded her hands in her lap, waiting. I walked to the sideboard, picked up my notebook, and held it against my chest. For years, I've listened to words that cut me. Words that dismissed my memories, erased Raphael, and treated this house as if it were already gone from me. At first, I tried to ignore them, but I realized if I stayed silent, I would disappear. So I began to write them down. I opened the notebook and began to read. Vivian, age 25. Told me I should sell. It'll come to me anyway. Damien. At 4th of July barbecue. Called backyard perfect for a pool once it's ours. Vivian, last Christmas dismissed roof repairs. Said it would all need redoing when she moves in. The room was silent except for the sound of my voice and the turning of pages. Vivian's face paled. Damien's smirk faded. And it didn't stop there, I continued, flipping to more recent entries. Vivian, at Teresa's birthday party, told relatives the house would be hers soon. Damien, told Rosa they'd take over, described renovations, a pool. Vivian, at church potluck. Called my leaving. Inevitable. Teresa gasped. Rosa nodded grimly. Adriana's hand flew to her mouth. I closed the notebook with a sharp snap. Recordings. I have witnesses. I have every word you spoke. You didn't just covet this house, you erased me from it while I was still alive. Vivian stammered. Mom, that's not... We didn't mean... Damien jumped in, his voice hard. This is ridiculous. You're twisting our words. I held the notebook high. No, this is your truth, and now everyone here knows it. The room was still, heavy with judgment. Vivian's eyes darted desperately around the table, searching for an ally. But Teresa looked away. Adriana shook her head, and Rosa's lips pressed into a firm line. For the first time, they were cornered. And I wasn't finished. I set the notebook down, my hand steady. You thought this dinner was about handing you the keys, but it's not. It's about revealing who you really are and showing you that the keys are already gone. They had no idea the feast was for their pride and their downfall. As they sat at my table, I opened my notebook and pressed play. The silence after my last words stretched long and taut, like a rope pulled to its breaking point. Vivian's face was pale, her fork untouched on her plate. Damien leaned back, trying to look unbothered, but his jaw twitched. Teresa sat frozen, Adriana's wide eyes darted between us, and Rosa's lips pressed tight in disapproval. I let the silence linger. Let them stew in it. Then, slowly, deliberately, I opened the drawer of the sideboard and pulled out my small speaker. I told you, I said softly, that I have more than words. Vivian shook her head quickly. Mom, please. I pressed play. Damien's voice filled the room, unmistakable, smug. Why waste money when it's already waiting for us? Vivian's laughter followed on the recording. Yes, once I'm in Mom's house, I'll finally have the kitchen I deserve. The sound echoed in the candlelit dining room, bouncing off the very walls they had mocked. Teresa's eyes widened. Adriana covered her mouth with her hand. Rosa shook her head slowly, her disapproval sharp as a blade. I stopped the recording. Do you deny it? Vivian's lips trembled. We were joking, that was out of context. Out of context? I asked coldly. What about this? I played another file. Damien again. This place is too much for her. We'll take good care of it once she moves out. It's just a matter of time. Then Vivian's voice. Smug and sure. It's inevitable. The room was thick with tension. Adriana whispered. You really said that? Her voice was filled with disbelief. Vivian's eyes darted. Her voice high-pitched and desperate. We didn't mean it like that. I stood tall, my hand resting on Raphael's chair at the head of the table. No, Vivian. You meant exactly what you said. You've been saying it for years. Planning my erasure while I'm still breathing. Damien's mask slipped. He leaned forward, his voice sharp. So, what if we talked about it? It's going to be ours eventually. Why pretend otherwise? You can't live here forever. Rosa gasped, slamming her hand against the table. Damien, how dare you speak that way to her? Teresa's voice shook with anger. Celeste isn't even gone. And you talk like she doesn't matter. Vivian's face crumpled. Stop, you don't understand. No, I cut in, my voice firm, steady. They understand perfectly. I reached again into the sideboard and pulled out a thick envelope. Evelyn's documents, signed and sealed. I placed it on the table, sliding it toward the center. This, I said, is the truth. My will, my trust, my directives, all legally binding. Vivian's hand shot out, but I snapped it back before she could touch it. Don't. You don't get to handle it. I opened the envelope and spread the pages across the table. My voice was calm, but each word struck like a hammer. Vivian Navarro, disinherited. Damien Brooks, disinherited. Effective immediately. You have no claim. Not to this house. Not to my belongings. Not to my legacy. Vivian gasped, her face blanching. What? You can't. I can, I said, steel in my tone. And I did. I pointed to the trustee clause. The house is placed in trust, with Iris Moreno as trustee. She alone holds authority to protect it, maintain it, and decide its future. You have no say. None. Vivian's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Damien swore under his breath, slamming his fist on the table. This is insane. You can't just cut your own daughter out like that. I can, I repeated, locking eyes with him. Because being a daughter is not a license to steal. Being a son-in-law is not a right to erase. You forfeited any claim the moment you laughed at me, the moment you treated me like I was already gone. Adriana's voice cracked as she spoke. Aunt Celeste, you really changed everything? I softened slightly, looking at her and then at Teresa and Rosa. Yes, I had to, for Raphael, for myself, for dignity. Then I read aloud the final clause, my voice strong. Any heir who demonstrates cruelty, entitlement, or neglect toward me during my lifetime is disinherited. Permanently. That means you, Vivian. That means you, Damien. Vivian shook her head wildly, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mom, please. I didn't mean it. I was careless, yes, but I love you. You can't do this. I stared at her, my heart heavy but resolute. Love doesn't erase words, Vivian. Love doesn't erase years of erasure. Love doesn't forget a mother while she's still alive. Damien tried one last time, his voice sharp, venomous. You'll regret this. You're old, Celeste. You'll need us someday. And when you do, don't expect us to come running. I leaned forward, my voice low but cutting. I don't expect anything from you. That's why I chose someone else. The room was silent except for Vivian's soft sobs. Teresa stared at her plate. Adriana's eyes brimmed with tears. Rosa's jaw was tight with anger. I gathered the papers calmly, sliding them back into the envelope. My hand didn't shake once. This house will never be yours, I said softly but firmly. Not while I live. Not when I'm gone. You wanted the keys, but you've already lost them. I turned to the others at the table. You all heard the truth tonight. You've seen the evidence. You know now who they are, and who I am. I will not be erased. Vivian reached across the table, desperation in her eyes. Please, Mom. Please. Don't do this. I pulled my hand back, standing tall. The decision is already made. Then I slid the trust document across the table, and the color drained from Vivian's face. The trust made it clear, the house was no longer hers to dream about. The dining room felt like a courtroom. Vivian sat pale and trembling, her eyes darting between the papers on the table and my face. Damien's jaw was clenched, fury radiating off him like heat. Teresa and Adriana sat stunned, their silence a mixture of disbelief and quiet judgment. Rosa's expression was sharp, her lips pressed together as if holding back words too harsh for the moment. I let the silence hang for a few seconds, long enough for everyone to feel its weight. Then I straightened the papers in front of me, my voice steady and calm. "This," I said, tapping the envelope, "isn't just a will. It's a trust. The house no longer belongs to me alone, it belongs to the trust. Which means it cannot be contested, and it cannot be claimed by those who do not respect it." Damien scoffed, leaning forward. "That's ridiculous. You can't just lock us out of our own inheritance. It's her house, Vivian's birthright." Rosa's voice cut in sharply before I could respond. "Birthright? She hasn't even passed, and you're talking like it's yours already. Do you hear yourself?" Damien glared at her, but Rosa didn't flinch. Her loyalty was mine. And in that moment, I silently thanked Raphael for the kind neighbors he had brought into our lives. I continued, ignoring Damien's sputtering. "I've named a trustee. Someone who has stood by me, who respects this house, who honors Raphael's memory, and who doesn't see these walls as just dollar signs." Vivian's eyes widened, a spark of hope flashing through her tears. "Me? You chose me, didn't you?" Her desperation was like a knife. She still didn't understand. "No," I said firmly. "The trustee is Iris Moreno." The room shifted. Teresa's head snapped up. Adriana's eyes widened. Rosa nodded slowly, approval in her expression. Vivian gasped, the sound jagged and raw. "What? Iris? She's not family." I met her gaze, unflinching. "Family isn't blood, Vivian. Family is loyalty. Family is respect. Iris has given me both. You've given me neither." Vivian's tears turned to sobs. "But Mom, no." My voice was sharp now, cutting through her pleas. "Don't call me that as if the word erases what you've done. You didn't forget my house. You forgot me." Her sobs shook her shoulders, but I pressed on, my resolve unshaken. "Iris will manage this house when I can't. She will decide what happens to it when I'm gone. You will not." Damien slammed his hand against the table. "This is insane. You're giving everything to an outsider? Do you know how this makes us look?" Rosa leaned forward, her voice cold. "It makes you look exactly like what you are, greedy, selfish, entitled." Teresa finally found her voice. "Celeste, you're serious? You've really removed them from everything?" "Yes," I said simply. "I had to protect myself. To protect Raphael's memory. To protect the love in these walls." I flipped to another document and laid it flat for them to see. "And it doesn't stop with the house. This is a medical directive. If anything happens to me, if I'm hospitalized, if I can't make decisions, Vivian has no authority. None." Vivian let out a strangled cry. "What, Mom? No, I'm your daughter. You're supposed to care," I interrupted. "You're supposed to love me. Instead, you treated me like I was already gone. Why would I trust my life to someone who wants me out of the way?" Her sobs deepened, shaking her whole frame. Adriana reached for her hand, but Vivian pulled away, burying her face in her palms. I looked at the younger girl, my voice softening. "Adriana, you should know if I need help, if decisions must be made. Iris has the authority. She is my voice, not Vivian." Adriana nodded slowly, her expression heavy with understanding. Damien muttered under his breath, but I ignored him. I turned instead to Rosa and Teresa. "You've both witnessed their words. Their arrogance, their erasure. You know I didn't make this choice lightly." Teresa swallowed hard, then spoke with conviction. "You did the right thing, Celeste. No one should be treated the way they treated you." Rosa added, "You're stronger than they ever gave you credit for." Their support steadied me, made my spine straighten even more. Vivian finally lifted her head, her face streaked with tears. "Please, don't do this. I'll change. I'll be better. Just, please, don't take it all away." Her plea twisted my heart, but I forced myself to stay firm. I had heard this voice before, the voice of a child begging not out of love, but out of fear of consequence. You don't change because of money, I said softly. You change because of love. And if love didn't stop you from erasing me, then nothing will. Damien muttered again, louder this time. This is pathetic. You'll regret this decision when you're alone in this house with no one to look after. You! I turned to him, my gaze sharp as glass. I'd rather be alone with dignity than surrounded by greed. Silence fell again, thicker than before. The air hummed with the weight of it, every pair of eyes on me. Finally, I gathered the documents, sliding them back into the envelope. The decision is final, the trust is sealed. The directives are in place. Vivian, Damien, you have no claim. Not to this house, not to my care, not to my legacy. Vivian sobbed harder, her shoulders shaking. Damien glared at me, his fists tight, his pride wounded. But I felt no fear, no hesitation. For the first time in years, I felt untouchable. And then I revealed the final twist: who would actually hold the keys. The keys to the house weren't for Vivian at all. For a long moment no one moved. Vivian sat trembling in her chair, tears streaking her face. Damien glared daggers at me, his jaw clenched so tightly I half expected it to snap. Teresa and Adriana exchanged uncertain glances, while Rosa sat with her arms folded, her expression unwaveringly firm. I took a deep breath and laid the final document flat on the table. My voice didn't waver. This house will never belong to Vivian, not now, not ever. Vivian let out a broken sob. Mom, please. No, I interrupted, my tone sharp. This isn't about begging now. This is about truth. I picked up the small brass key from my pocket, the old spare Raphael had once carried on his keychain. Its weight was familiar, heavy with memory. I placed it gently on the table, the sound of it hitting the wood echoing like a gavel. Do you want to know who will hold the keys when I'm gone? I asked quietly. Vivian's wet eyes flickered with desperate hope. Me. It has to be me. I looked straight at her, unflinching. No. The keys go to Iris. The room erupted. Vivian gasped so loudly it was almost a wail. What? Damien's chair screeched as he stood up, his fists clenched. You're giving the house to her? She's not family. She doesn't deserve this. She deserves it more than you ever will, I said evenly. Iris has been here through everything: Raphael's illness, his passing, my grief. She never once spoke of this house as if it were hers. She respected it, respected me. That is what family means. Vivian shook her head violently, sobbing. But Mom, I'm your daughter. You can't do this to me. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on hers. I can. Because being a daughter is not about blood alone, it's about love, loyalty, and respect. You forgot all three. Iris remembered them. Rosa reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're doing the right thing, Celeste. This house deserves someone who sees it as a home, not a prize. Vivian's sobs grew louder, her body shaking. This isn't fair. I should have the house. It's mine. I slammed my palm against the table, the sound sharp and final. No, Vivian. It was never yours. It was Raphael's and mine. We built it with love. We filled it with memories. We kept it alive. And you treated it like a trophy waiting to be claimed. That's why you lost it. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Vivian's sobs. Damien sneered, his voice dripping with venom. You're pathetic, old and bitter. You're clinging to a house because you've got nothing else. Fine. Give it to your friend. But don't come crying to us when you're lonely and forgotten. Rosa's eyes flashed, and she turned to him. She won't be forgotten, not by those who actually care about her. Teresa finally found her voice. Celeste, this must have been so hard for you. But I see now you had no choice. They treated you horribly. You're brave for standing up like this. Adriana, quiet until now, leaned forward. Aunt Celeste, I understand. I don't blame you. Her voice trembled with sincerity. Vivian looked at her cousin, horrified. Adriana, You're supposed to be on my side. Adriana shook her head sadly. Not when you're wrong, Vivian. I placed my hand on the brass key again, feeling its cool weight. This house will pass into Iris's care. She will keep it safe. She will protect Raphael's roses, our memories, our love. She will make sure this house is remembered for what it truly was, a home built on love, not greed. Vivian let out a sound between a sob and a scream. No, 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 you can't do this to me. You can't give away what's mine. I stared at her, my expression calm but hard. It was never yours, and it never will be. Damien muttered a curse under his breath, grabbing Vivian by the arm. We're leaving. This whole dinner is a joke. Vivian resisted, still sobbing. No. I won't accept this. Mom, please. I'll do better. I'll change. I stood tall, my hand steady on Raphael's chair. If you wanted to change, you would have done it years ago. I don't believe you now, and even if I did, it's too late. The decision is sealed. Vivian's sobs echoed through the room as Damien dragged her toward the door. She glanced back one last time, her eyes red and desperate. I'll never forgive you for this. I met her gaze, unflinching. And I'll never forget what you tried to do to me. The door slammed behind them, the sound reverberating through the house like thunder. Silence fell once more, heavy but peaceful. Teresa exhaled slowly. Celeste. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen. Rosa squeezed my shoulder. You took your power back. They'll never erase you again. Adriana's eyes brimmed with tears. I'll never forget this night. You showed me what it means to protect yourself. I smiled faintly, my chest tight with both pain and relief. Thank you, I whispered. I just couldn't let them destroy what Raphael and I built. The candlelight flickered, casting soft shadows on the walls. I reached for the key again, feeling its familiar weight. It no longer felt like a burden. It felt like freedom. For the first time, Vivian understood she had lost everything. The fallout was immediate, and it was brutal. The night after the dinner, the house was quiet again. The candles had burned low, the dishes sat in the sink, and the echoes of Vivian's sobs still lingered in the air. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, staring at the brass key lying in front of me. For the first time in months, it didn't feel like a symbol of dread. It felt like victory. But while I found peace within these walls, Vivian and Damien's world began to collapse outside of them. It started with Rosa. She didn't waste time. By Sunday morning, she was sitting at coffee with two neighbors, retelling what she had witnessed. By evening, the story had spread down the block. How my daughter and her husband had laughed about renovations while I was still alive. How they had spoken of my house as though I were already buried. How I had stood tall and disinherited them in front of everyone. Neighbors who had once waved politely from their porches now shook their heads when Vivian and Damien walked by. Conversations stopped when they entered the grocery store. Smiles turned into whispers. The respect they had once basked in quickly soured into judgment. But the shame didn't stop at the neighborhood. Teresa, who had been at that dinner table, spoke of it to her sisters. Adriana confided in friends. Soon, word traveled through the family tree like wildfire. By the end of the week, the story was everywhere. Vivian and Damien had mocked me, forgotten me, erased me, and in doing so, erased themselves from my inheritance. Some called me ruthless. Others called me brave. Most called it justice. Vivian, meanwhile, was unraveling. She showed up at my door 2 days later, her eyes red, her voice hoarse. "Mom, please," she sobbed, gripping the doorway. I didn't mean it, I was careless. Damien pushed me into it. I love you, I swear I do. Please. Don't do this. For a moment, I saw the little girl she used to be, the one who cried when she scraped her knee, who clung to me during thunderstorms. My heart twisted, but then I remembered her smug laughter at the dinner table, her casual dismissal of Raphael's memory, her arrogant certainty that the house was hers. You didn't just slip, Vivian. I said quietly. You chose. Over and over again. And now you're only sorry because you lost. Her tears deepened. I'll change. I promise. I shook my head. Change isn't born from fear of consequences. It's born from love. And if love didn't stop you before, why would it now? I closed the door gently. The sound final. On the other side, I heard her sobs echo down the street. 2 nights later, Damien tried his own approach. He showed up alone, his fists clenched, his expression hard. This is ridiculous, Celeste, he snapped. You're letting your emotions cloud your judgment. You can't just disinherit your only daughter. Do you realize how this looks? To the family? To the community? I stood tall in the doorway, refusing to let him in. I realize perfectly well, and I don't care how it looks. I care about the truth. His jaw tightened. You'll regret this. You're old, Celeste. You'll need help one day. Don't expect us to be there. I met his glare with calm steel. I don't expect anything from you. That's why I gave the keys to someone else. His face flushed with rage, but I closed the door before he could say more. That night, I added another entry to my notebook. Damien threatened regret, called me old, showed no remorse. Confirmed entitlement persists. Every time they opened their mouths, they only proved me right. But while they withered in shame and anger, I bloomed. Neighbors who had once seen me as quiet and sentimental now looked at me with admiration. They brought casseroles and pies, invited me for coffee, offered to help with errands. They spoke to me not with pity, but with respect. I wasn't invisible anymore. And Adriana, sweet, bright Adriana, began visiting more often. She sat with me in the garden, helping me tend to Raphael's roses. One afternoon, as we clipped dead blooms together, she said softly, Aunt Celeste, you've taught me something. You showed me it's never too late to stand up for yourself. I'll carry that with me forever. Her words filled me with warmth. Maybe the inheritance wasn't just about money or property. Maybe it was about this teaching the next generation that love and dignity matter more than entitlement. Weeks passed, and the story of what I had done became almost legend in the family. Cousins whispered about it at gatherings. Old friends of Raphael's shook my hand with quiet respect. Even strangers in town seemed to look at me differently, as if they could sense the strength beneath my smile. Vivian and Damien, meanwhile, shrank from the world. Their social circle collapsed. Their friends distanced themselves. Even at church, where Vivian once prided herself on appearances, people gave her sympathetic smiles laced with judgment. They had tried to erase me. Instead, they erased themselves. One evening, I sat alone in the garden, watching the sun dip low, painting the sky in gold and crimson. The roses swayed in the breeze, their petals catching the last light of day. I touched one gently, remembering Raphael's voice. Don't drown them, Celeste. They like a gentle touch. I smiled softly, whispering into the quiet air. They thought the house was theirs. But it was always ours. And now, it always will be. As they withered in bitterness, I thrived in peace. In the end, I didn't just protect my house. I protected myself. The house was quiet again. But this time, it didn't feel heavy or suffocating. The silence carried peace instead of fear. I walked through the rooms slowly, running my fingers along the walls that had seen decades of my life. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting to be erased. I felt present, alive, strong. The dining room table still bore faint scratches from the night of the confrontation, the night Vivian and Damien had lost everything. The candle wax stains on the tablecloth hadn't fully come out, but I didn't mind. Those marks were reminders now. Not of pain, but of power. The house hadn't changed much in all these months. Raphael's jacket still hung on the hook by the door. His hammer was still in the garage. The roses in the garden still bloomed in stubborn defiance against time. But I had changed. I no longer clung to these things out of fear that they'd be taken from me. I held them because I wanted to, because they mattered, because I mattered. Neighbors who once saw me as fragile now saw me as fierce. Teresa and Adriana visited often, bringing laughter and warmth back into the house. Rosa came by with fresh bread, always slipping in a proud smile that said, "You did it." And Iris, the woman who now held the trust, stood by me unwaveringly. She became more than a trustee. She became family. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch together sipping tea, Iris said quietly, "You know, Celeste, I'll make sure this house is always protected. Even when you're gone, it'll carry your story." Tears pricked my eyes. "Thank you, Iris. That's all I ever wanted. Not for the house to be beautiful or modern or valuable, just remembered, just loved." She smiled softly. "And it will be." Those words gave me more comfort than I could ever put into paper. Vivian, on the other hand, had disappeared from my life almost entirely. Occasionally, I'd hear whispers of her, how she avoided family gatherings, how people whispered behind her back at church, how her marriage with Damien was strained by the shame of what they had done. Sometimes, I'd see her name pop up on my phone, but I never answered. Letters arrived once or twice, filled with pleas and apologies, but I could see through the words. She wasn't sorry for forgetting me, she was sorry for losing the house. I tucked the letters into my notebook, labeling them like every other piece of evidence, then closed the cover. That chapter was sealed. I did not hate her, though. I pitied her. Because in her hunger for walls and windows, she had lost something far greater, the love of a mother who would have given her everything, had she only asked with kindness. The irony never left me. She had wanted the house so badly, yet by grasping for it so greedily, she had lost it forever. As for me, I discovered something I hadn't expected. I wasn't afraid of being forgotten anymore. For years, that had been my greatest fear. That once I was gone, once Raphael's roses had withered and the paint had faded, my life would vanish with me. But now, I knew better. I wouldn't be forgotten. My name, my story, my love, they would live on. Through Iris, through Teresa, through Adriana, through the neighbors who told my story with pride. Through every person who heard what I had done and said, she stood her ground. One evening, I lit a single candle in the living room and sat in Raphael's old chair. I held the brass key in my hand, feeling its familiar grooves. I whispered into the stillness, "We did it, my love. They thought they could erase us. But we're still here. Always." The flame flickered gently, as though he were answering. The keys had been my greatest fear because I thought once they left my hands, so would my legacy. But I learned the truth. The keys were never the legacy. The love was. The laughter, the memories, the strength to protect what mattered, that was the inheritance worth leaving behind. Now, when I walked through the house, I didn't see impending loss. I saw life. The kitchen walls still glowed yellow with warmth. The roses still bloomed defiantly. The photographs still told stories. And I still stood here, not erased, not forgotten, but fiercely, gloriously present. One day, yes, the keys will pass to Iris. But they will not carry shame. They will carry love. They will remind her, and everyone else, of the woman who refused to be erased. I closed my eyes that night with peace in my heart, knowing my story was sealed not just in documents, but in the hearts of those who truly mattered. My daughter wanted the house, but the keys went to someone else, and that choice will echo longer than her greed ever could.